our sort of news broadcaster in Australia, and they called it a recycling crisis. And everyone in the comments was like, whoa, no, you're really mispositioning like what the problem is that we're dealing with. It's not a recycling crisis. It's much, much bigger than that. As you said, Iram, to sort of frame why we're focusing on everything other than recycling, because that seems like what most people are focusing on.
We can map that from the start, like what does it in fact mean, recycling, and then we are going to address the not recycling issue.
The whole point of not recycling is to look at the service models or the alternate models, and I think that composting is almost equivalent to recycling. It's trying to put it somewhere rather than changing the way that you operate. Some people have a perception that recycling is like shredding up the material and then like, you know, putting it in something else. There's a distinction between the recycling in terms of it going back into something that's very similar to what it's come from, maintaining the value versus up or downcycling. And I think that we're not really recycling if we're downcycling it. And then upcycling, I can't think of many instances where that's actually true. People call things upcycling, but whether or not they've actually gained value, I think is very questionable.
Yeah. Design for disassembly came to mind, reusability, designing for durability. So if it's durable enough and long-lasting enough, timeless, then maybe it won't need to be recycled. It can just be reused.
I'm wondering whether we could find something about refuse, which would be the first step. I don't know how it could, be part of it. I don't know if there are examples of companies who decided to just like not go for something, or that'd be maybe interesting.
You could also frame this conversation in terms of the butterfly diagram. So we're just looking at the technical cycles and recycling is last. So what are all the other bits that people don't tend to talk about that much? For me, this one's really about things that will enable the systemic changes that are not recycling.
All right.
Thanks, Sarah.
Nice to see you all.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, thanks. I'm excited for this one. Good luck, researchers. It's on. The pressure's on. Yeah. All right, see you guys. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Welcome to Hyloh Observatory, not recycling. Basically, anything that helps reduce waste and transition to circular economy that isn't recycling. Our researchers did pull 10 references each. Anyone can pull anything that they like, that they find interesting, that they've come across. But the idea would be, Elodie would be listening to your research findings, asking questions, talking about applications, ideas, or different knowledge that sort of pops up from what we find in the research. I will hopefully find some like patterns or themes and identify some key takeaways from the research.
Yeah, so this one was a bit different than usual because it wasn't really researching materials for me. So it was looking more at service models or providers who can help enable anything other than recycling. So one of the first places I looked was the idea of product as a service. Like most things nowadays, it's becoming a tech problem, or there's lots of software available to help enable this. So the Circular is one that I found. So that just allows you to create subscriptions and rental models for your product. Moving on from there, looked a lot at resale, and there's quite a lot in the fashion industry. It was interesting that I found is that ThreadUp, who was a resale platform, has also pivoted a little bit to now offer, I guess, their back end to other brands. Also, they've sort of become a technology company.
Any of them reporting on impact savings or anything like that with resale? Is that a feature of any of these that you found?
A lot of them have reporting within them. I didn't particularly dig into like if they measure carbon dioxide equivalents or anything like that, but I'm sure that's in there.
Okay.
Yeah, Cisco's an interesting example because one of the first things they did was just up their recycled content, which obviously many people do first and then realize that they still have it's a systemic problem. So it's really interesting to see Cisco's evolution there. And then moving on to some of the other areas that can be challenging for brands who want to launch take-back programs or things like that is the idea of reverse logistics, because a lot of that cost in shipping even to customers is that last mile. So it's not necessarily from the distribution center, it's from local post office to the home. So Redwood is kind of leading the charge here, and there are many others who've kind of streamlined the way that they manage that reverse logistics to make it more financially viable to offer customer returns and almost encourage it. The idea is to streamline that, and also have seen a few companies who are like very seriously looking into the way that their containers or their transportation comes back empty a lot of the time. So how can they make use of that space?
So I ended up focusing a lot on processes and technologies, things that communities are doing, and software or consulting services that companies are providing to recapture products for reuse, repair, remanufacture, in some cases using less materials to begin with. First one is the Repair Cafe International. As its name suggests, it's a place you can go to have your products repaired, or better yet, learn how to repair products. So these cafes exist all around the world. There's around 2,500 of them. The visitors can bring in their broken items from home, and together with specialists, they work together to make their repairs and learn about the process. Even if you have nothing to repair, you can go to the cafe and you can enjoy being in that environment, maybe joining others to repair their products. And they also have a reading area where you can read about repair and DIY projects. It kind of ends up being a meeting place, a place where you can create a community around repair and change our relationship with to our products. Motonai campaign was something that was launched by an NGO, and the concept of Motonai is deeply rooted in Japanese culture. Japan is the second largest per capita generator of plastic waste in the world, apparently. So they're producing more than the entire European Union. And the NGO was launched, or this campaign was launched to bring Motonai back. The meaning is actually motai, comes from a Buddhist word that refers to the essence of things, and it can be applied to everything in our physical world. And it shows that objects do not exist in isolation, but they're connected to one another. And since nai is a negation, motonai becomes an expression of a sadness over the loss of the link between two entities, the living and the non-living. So it's kind of used in daily life ubiquitously. Motonai kind of translates to what a waste. They have activities on reuse and repair, and they really want to bring this idea back that if we can just value and respect what we do have, then we would not be so quick to throw it away or recycle it. A really cool example of smart interiors. So each component of what they call a loop kitchen has an RFID chip that can identify everything about that material. Each product comes with a digital twin that's linked to the online cloud database, and the new kitchen automatically keeps track of all its parts. So it's incredibly easy to maintain, and they also have a maintenance platform which allows you to reorder parts right away and also get an overview of how all of those materials and different components are doing. The aim, of course, here is that individual parts can be replaced to prolong the lifespan of the interiors, and the company takes care of the old parts and makes sure they are remanufactured and also recirculated. Definitely a kitchen that I would love to have.
All right, so I'll just do some of the high hitters here. So the one that I think is pretty cool is the New York Fashion Act. And so this is a bill that's from New York, for New York State, and that this is going to require any brand that wants to sell fashion in New York will have to meet certain requirements. All transparency in like their supply chain, their materials choices, what their environmental and sustainability programming looks like what their goals are, how they're going to achieve it. And so some of that will include recycling, but also it will include like reuse and repair. I think that this could be a big game changer. Also, it'll be global. It's not going to just be in New York, because it'll be any brand that wants to sell in New York.
So it's not even up to the companies in their respective countries anymore.
It's similar to the way it's based off of how California has their car emissions requirements. So any car brand that wants to sell in California has to have a certain requirement for what the emissions look like. So the New Balance PRJ 3.0, this one is
definitely old. It's from like 2018 or something, but it's still the idea that hasn't really been changed. And it's that they're designing these sneakers backwards. They were looking at what they had already in their, dead stock and surplus and scraps, and building a shoe based off of what they had. Because then there's the new Nike ones, the Mindbody ones, which it's a similar idea, except it is the reverse. So they created these new sneakers where it's the top and the bottom, the upper and the lower, that are connected through like a cord connection. So there's no glues, there's no adhesives. They're changing how sneakers go, but also the same idea of designing a sneaker and then kind of looking for the materials that fit within that.
I think we've all thrown away sofas, or not thrown away, but hopefully resold sofas that no longer fit into our apartment, whether that's because the sectional is on the wrong side, or now we have kids that we want to have a larger sofa for. I really love this concept of design for users, like evolving lifestyle needs that helps promote product longevity. A lot of the links that I got really excited by through this research process are all about not recycling from the standpoint of how can we prevent, or rather prolong, the need to recycle. So I think in this case, this is a really strong idea of user needs integration as a way to achieve the prolongation of recycling. But then this sofa does so much more. I mean, it's literally the ideal poster boy for design strategies that facilitate circular practices and add direct value to the customer. The fabric is not permanently attached to the frame, and you can just easily pop it off with these elastic loop cords on the bottom. The foam and the springs underneath it are all completely separable away from the frame. They are able to separate high wear and low wear surfaces. This is a technique I'm really interested in, this idea of predictive maintenance, and the idea that if we can predict when our products are going to fail, we can prevent the catastrophic damage that actually creates a shorter product lifespan. And in this case, Sensorify, they develop Internet of Things tools that plug into train tracks, and so they can detect when there is like vibration anomalies or temperature anomalies, and then use those data inputs to say, here's a point where failure is about to happen. And through that, then they're able to reduce the amount of track downtime and have trains running more frequently, because they can actually plan when maintenance is happening. I'm sure we've all been on trains before where it's like, sorry, due to maintenance, we have to stay in the station, and now you're late to your meeting, but it's not our problem. Just in general, if we can add predictive maintenance to our product, it will allow us to generate a model of when our products will come back into stock after they've been used, if we're creating a circular economy for our product. More of a conceptual effort by Frolic Studios. These guys are just crushing it. So they've essentially tapped into 4 strategies to prolong recycling. They use design to drive that. And I think, again, design is just a really strong tool in the circular economy when it's paired with operations, logistics, and overall strategy. The first one there is a design for upgradability, but really thinking about planned obsolescence, because for this like upgradability concept, especially within electronics. Silver speaker there, that's their design for remanufacturability, and they really go into how they facilitate remanufacturing through design. And I love it because it's all about creating super quick to disassemble components, because it reduces the amount of labor costs that go into actually remanufacturing that product. So they use a magnetic system to suck out all of the connector pins, and then the whole thing just pops open, electronics come out, and then they can refinish the case and refurbish the electronics. So the tall white guy over there, that speaker is interesting because it's about designing for the longest possible lifespans, trying to be an heirloom object. And so what they do is they incorporate off-the-shelf standardized components that anybody can, if they take their own volition to, replace as time goes on. The body that's made out of ceramic, they're trying to encourage kitsungi, that Japanese art of repairing ceramics when it breaks. And then the knob or the diffuser is a premium brass. And so I love all these hyper durable products that we can pass down. And then lastly, just because we shouldn't, I'll talk about their lowest speaker, which is a design for recyclability. But it's actually really, really clever. And I'll talk about the parts that's not recycling. So they have some difficult to recycle. They have materials in there that you can't just pop into the bin. And so what they've done is they've actually used the magnet that they put into the speaker system as a secondary magnet you can just pop on your fridge once you're done with that. And the electronic cable can be reused as a charging cable in your homes.
I love that there's the same companies taking different approaches with different products. I haven't seen that before. So thank you everyone for your research. It was really, really fascinating. And I think we've got a lot of R's to add to the lexicon. Laura, was really interesting for me to hear about your restrictive. There's some restrictive measures going on. There's reimburse opportunities. And then there was also reverse design. And Fiona mentioned reverse logistics. Erin, I really liked your redundant. I hadn't heard too much about redundant materials. Makes a lot of sense to me. Regret was also a really nice one. Also RFID was cool. Fiona, rental, resale, remade. Grant, reliability, restoration, and recurate was really important to me as well. Melody, drum roll please, if you could give us your favorite research finds.
I've made categories. I really commend the brands that are actually doing stuff. So the bills and everything like in terms of legislation that is pushing us, but I guess looks like humans do like or need to be obliged to do things to do them. The product to service, the anticipation, that is definitely a key element when you want to eco-design, I guess. What I like as well is the idea of hidden ideas. There's the obvious, like all these actions, but the example you gave, Grant, of this company developing sensors for the maintenance of railways, it shows that sometimes the good idea is not necessarily like sexy and in your face, or adding an Instagram story that's every designer is gonna like, but like stuff like that. This is an example of technology well used, I guess. I like the idea of a material passport that goes with traceability and transparency, and also the idea of community and the soul that was in the Japanese word, but in other actions. Top 3 would be, I guess, the frolic, because I'm a designer. I like beautiful objects. I like the fact that, yes, what you said, Sarah, is that they addressed the same product with various options. And I think it's interesting to also have the client decide maybe which speaker you're going to choose. So who's going to win, the aesthetic or the contribution, if you think it's better to have a long-lasting object or something that is, I don't know, upgradable or whatever. The New York Fashion Act, so one of the bills, could be others, but, and I really like the Japanese words, bringing this idea of soul and connection with things. So yeah, those would be Frolic, New York Fashion Act, and the Motanai. The idea of recycling, supposedly you collect, you sort out stuff, waste, and the idea when you recycle is to put that waste into a new manufacturing cycle. So it's either exactly the same one that the material came from. So we could imagine having, like, I don't know, glass bottles that are considered as waste, and they would be crushed, and we would remanufacture glass bottles out of that waste. That would be kind of like a perfect circle in a way. Obviously, that kind of things does not happen that often, because once the material has been used, has been like transformed a bit, we often see that the quality is lesser than the original one, the virgin one. So that may cause problem to be back in the same cycle, but that would be ideal. Paper works like that as well. Like you can bring back paper into the paper manufacturing cycle, even though recycled paper does not have exactly the same properties as a paper manufactured with virgin fibers, for instance. Then there is the idea of still recycling, but for another type of manufacturing cycle. That could be the example of plastic bottles, the Coca-Cola or any kind of soda bottles that we use that is in PET, polyethylene terephthalates, and we will collect those, we will like crush them and bring back the plastic to another manufacturing cycle that could be manufacturing fibers for fleeces and garments that are made out of PET, but using the waste product of the bottle industry. So that could be considered recycling. Upcycling is using waste, definitely, usually with a creative process that brings more value to the waste and to even to the original product. So that could be, if we take the example of glass bottles, someone who would collect old bottles in glass and maybe just like cut them, carve them, do something out of it to transform it into a vase or a lamp or whatever you could imagine. That would be using the waste. Definitely an option for you not to use a virgin bottle to do the same thing, but you're not putting it back in a proper or like stricto sensus manufacturing cycle into an industry like that. So it is a way to use waste, but not necessarily with the same purpose, outcome, and I guess also scale,